I stood frozen as my mother's voice cut through the champagne-soaked celebration like a serrated knife. "We need to discuss your estate. Tonight. Right now, actually." The engagement party buzzed around us, crystal clinking, laughter echoing off the vaulted ceilings of the country club ballroom. My sister Brielle twirled across the dance floor in her cream-colored dress, her fiancé Donovan spinning her under the twinkling lights. She looked radiant. This was supposed to be her night. But my mother's eyes weren't on Brielle. They were locked on me with that familiar intensity that made my stomach twist. "Mom, this isn't the time or..." "Don't tell me about timing, Lennox." My father stepped beside her, his jaw set in that stubborn line I'd known my entire life. "We've been patient long enough. Your grandmother left you that property when you were 23. You're 28 now. 5 years you've had it, and you've done nothing with it." My throat tightened. Around us, guests were starting to notice. Aunt Margot paused mid-conversation, her eyes darting between us. My mother's sister, Aunt Vivian, set down her wine glass, her expression carefully neutral. "I've maintained it. I've paid the taxes. If there. You've wasted its potential." My mother's voice rose slightly, enough that more heads turned. "That estate is worth over $2 million, Lennox. $2 million. And you're letting it sit there like some kind of museum to the past." I felt heat crawl up my neck. This wasn't a private conversation anymore. This was becoming a spectacle. "We're not discussing this here," I said quietly, firmly. "Before you hear what happened next, I need you to understand something. Have you ever had someone you love try to take something that wasn't theirs? Something you worked to protect, to honor? Drop a comment below and tell me your story, because what happened that night changed everything I thought I knew about family." My father moved closer, his cologne overwhelming in its familiarity. "You're being selfish, Lennox. Your sister is starting her life. Do you know what that property could do for her? For her future children." "My future children," I corrected, my voice sharper than intended. "Grandmother left it to me." "Grandmother was senile when she changed that will," my mother hissed, and there it was, the thing they'd been dancing around for 5 years. The real grievance. That property should have gone to me. I'm her daughter. But she got it in her head that you, the precious granddaughter who visited every Sunday, deserved it more. The words hung in the perfumed air between us. Across the room, I caught a glimpse of my grandmother, Cecilia, seated in a high-backed chair near the windows. She was 84 now, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her posture ramrod straight. She watched us with those sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She'd heard every word. "Grandmother was perfectly lucid when she updated her estate plan," I said slowly. "And you know it." "What we know," my father interjected, his voice dropping to that dangerous calm he used in business negotiations, "is that you're clinging to something you don't need. You have a good job. You have your own apartment. That estate is just sitting there, bleeding money in maintenance costs. Money I pay. Money that could be invested in your sister's future." My mother's voice cracked with frustration. "God, Lennox, why are you being so difficult? We're not asking you to give up everything. Just transfer the deed to us. We'll manage it. We'll handle the rental income. We'll make sure it actually serves the family instead of just existing." I stared at them, these two people who'd raised me, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped with homework and showed up to every school play. When had they become strangers? Or had they always been this way, and I'd just been too young to see it? "No," I said simply. The single word landed like a gunshot. My mother's face flushed crimson. "Excuse me." I said no. The answer is no. It was no 5 years ago when you first asked. It was no 3 years ago when you brought it up at Thanksgiving. It's no tonight. It will be no tomorrow. That property is mine, and I'm not transferring it to anyone. My father's hand shot out and gripped my upper arm. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to be uncomfortable. "You listen to me. Take your hand off her. Now." The voice that cut through our argument was soft, barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. My grandmother stood beside us, her cane gripped in one hand, her other hand resting on her pearls. She was several inches shorter than any of us, diminished by age and illness, but in that moment she seemed to tower over everyone in the room. My father released my arm immediately, stepping back like a child caught misbehaving. "Cecilia," my mother began, her tone shifting to something placating, "we were just discussing." "I heard what you were discussing, Marlowe. The entire ballroom heard what you were discussing." My grandmother's gaze swept across the room, and I followed it. At least 40 people were watching us now, conversations halted, champagne glasses frozen halfway to lips. "You've made quite the scene at your daughter's engagement party." Brielle had stopped dancing. She stood in the middle of the floor, Donovan's arm around her waist, her face stricken. Guilt twisted in my chest. This wasn't her fault. None of this was her fault. "Mother, we're simply trying to have a family conversation about what's best for everyone," my father said, his lawyer voice emerging, smooth, reasonable, utterly calculating. "Are you?" It wasn't a question. My grandmother turned those laser-focused eyes on him. "Tell me, Garrett, when exactly did you decide that what's best for everyone meant overriding my explicit wishes and attempting to bully my granddaughter into surrendering her inheritance?" "Now we're not bullying." "You grabbed her arm," my grandmother said flatly. "I saw you. Everyone saw you." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. My father's face had gone from red to ashen. "That property," my grandmother continued, her voice still quiet but cutting through the stillness like glass, "was left to Lennox for very specific reasons. Reasons I explained to both of you 5 years ago when you first contested the will. Reasons I explained again 3 years ago when you tried to have me declared incompetent. Reasons that haven't changed simply because you've decided Brielle's engagement is a convenient opportunity to apply pressure in a public setting." My mother found her voice. "Mother, you don't understand the financial realities." "I understand perfectly well." My grandmother's lips compressed into a thin line. "I understand that you've spent your inheritance. I understand that your husband's law practice is struggling after that malpractice settlement. I understand that you're drowning in debt from trying to maintain a lifestyle you can no longer afford." The words fell like bombs. Around us, I heard gasps, whispers. My Aunt Vivian's eyes went wide. "How dare you?" my father breathed. "How dare I?" My grandmother's voice finally rose, sharp and clear. "How dare you attempt to rob your daughter of her security because you mismanaged your own finances? How dare you stand here, at your daughter's engagement celebration, and try to strong-arm Lennox into giving up the one thing I made sure she'd always have? The one thing I protected for her." "Protected from what?" My mother's voice shook. "From us? Her own parents." "Yes." The single word hung in the air, brutal in its simplicity. My grandmother turned to face them fully, and I saw something I'd never seen before, not anger, but disappointment so profound it seemed to age her another decade. "I protected it from you because I knew exactly what you'd do. I knew you'd see it as a piggy bank. I knew you'd pressure her, manipulate her, make her feel guilty for having something you wanted. And I was right." "We're her parents," my father said, and for the first time I heard something that might have been pain in his voice. "We have a right." "You have no rights to her inheritance," my grandmother interrupted. "None. Legally, morally, or ethically. That estate was purchased by my husband in 1967. We built our family there. We raised our children there. When he died, it became mine. And when I die," she paused, her gaze shifting to me, "Lennox will inherit the rest of my estate as well. All of it. Every penny, every property, every investment." The ballroom erupted into chaos. My mother gasped. My father's face went purple. Aunt Vivian's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Brielle made a small sound of distress. But my grandmother wasn't finished. "I amended my will 6 months ago," she continued, her voice cutting through the noise. "My attorney, Judge Raymond Carmichael, many of you know him, witnessed and notarized the changes. The estate, the investment portfolio, the vacation property in Vermont, the apartment in Manhattan. All of it goes to Lennox. Not a trust with Marlowe and Garrett as trustees. Not split between my children. To Lennox. Entirely. Irrevocably. You can't do this, my mother whispered, her face crumpling. I'm your daughter. I'm your own daughter. And you've proven time and again that you value money over integrity. That you'd sacrifice your daughter's security for your own comfort. That you'd create a scene at your other daughter's engagement party to get what you want. My grandmother's voice softened slightly, but the steel remained. I loved you, Marlowe. I still love you. But I will not reward this behavior. I will not enable it. And I will not allow you to destroy what I've built for Lennox. My mother turned to me, tears streaming down her face. Lennox. Please. You can't let her do this. Tell her you'll share it. Tell her you don't need all of it. Please. I looked at my mother, this woman who'd read me bedtime stories and braided my hair and taught me to bake chocolate chip cookies. This woman who was now begging me to surrender my future, to fix her mistakes. I love you, Mom, I said quietly. But grandmother's right. You would have wasted it. You would have leveraged it, borrowed against it, sold it piece by piece to maintain appearances. And then there'd be nothing left. So you're choosing money over your own mother? Her voice broke on the last word. I'm choosing to respect grandmother's wishes. I'm choosing to protect what she worked her entire life to build. I'm choosing to honor her trust in me. I paused, feeling tears prick my own eyes. I'm choosing myself. For once, I'm choosing myself. My father grabbed my mother's arm, gently this time, but firmly. We're leaving. No. My mother yanked her arm free, her grief transmuting to fury. No, I'm not leaving until she understands what she's done. Until everyone here understands what kind of person would turn her back on her own family for money. Marlowe. My grandmother's voice was sharp. You're making this worse. Worse? Worse. My mother's voice rose to a near shriek. You've cut me out of your will. You've given everything to her. You've humiliated me in front of my entire family, my friends, everyone. How could it possibly be worse? Because, my grandmother said quietly, I could tell them why I changed the will 6 months ago. I could explain exactly what prompted that final decision. My mother went very still. My father's hand returned to her arm, and this time she didn't pull away. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? I asked. My grandmother looked at me, and I saw something like regret in her eyes. 6 months ago, your mother came to visit me. She brought documents for me to sign. She told me they were updates to my medical directives, giving her power of attorney in case I became incapacitated. A cold feeling spread through my chest. They weren't medical directives, my grandmother continued. They were quitclaim deeds. For the estate. For the Vermont property. She was trying to get me to sign over everything to her while, as she put it, I still had enough mind left to make it legal. The ballroom had gone silent again, but this silence was different. Uglier. Shocked. That's not, I didn't, my mother stammered. I had Judge Carmichael review the documents, my grandmother said. He confirmed what they were. He also recommended I consider filing charges for attempted fraud. I declined. Because you're my daughter. Because I hoped even then, that you'd see reason. That you'd stop. You don't understand the pressure we're under, my father said, his voice hoarse. The debts. The judgments against the firm. We're drowning, Cecilia. We're literally drowning. That property could save us. Then you should have thought about that before you spent beyond your means for the last 20 years, my grandmother replied. Before you leveraged your home to buy a vacation house you used twice. Before you leased luxury cars you couldn't afford. Before you hired an interior designer to redecorate every 2 years to keep up with your neighbors. Each sentence landed like a physical blow. My parents seemed to shrink with every word. Financial problems can be solved, my grandmother continued, her voice gentler now but no less firm. Bankruptcy is humiliating, but it's survivable. You could downsize. Sell the house. Move into something reasonable. Rebuild. Thousands of people do it every year. We'd lose everything, my mother whispered. You'd lose things, my grandmother corrected. Not everything. Not each other. Not your daughters, though you're certainly testing that relationship tonight. But you'd still have yourselves. You'd still have the opportunity to start over, to make better choices. And what? My father's voice was bitter. We're supposed to just accept that? Accept poverty while our daughter sits on millions. Lennox isn't sitting on anything. She's employed. She works hard. She pays her own bills. The estate I left her is her security, her future, her children's future. It's not a bailout fund for her parents' bad decisions. I felt something break inside me, not with a dramatic snap but with a quiet, inevitable giving way, like a dam that's held too long against too much pressure. These were my parents. The people who were supposed to protect me, guide me, want what was best for me. And here they were, arguing that I should sacrifice my future to rescue them from consequences they'd created. I think you should leave, I heard myself say. My mother's head snapped toward me. What? You've ruined Brielle's party. You've humiliated me. You've shown everyone here exactly who you are. My voice was steady despite the tears now streaming down my face. I think you should leave. Lennox, sweetie, please, my mother reached for me. I stepped back. Don't touch me. Don't call me sweetie. Don't pretend this is about anything other than money. You tried to defraud grandmother. You grabbed my arm when I said no. You've spent 5 years trying to guilt me, pressure me, manipulate me into giving up what's mine. I took a shuddering breath. So yes. Leave. Now. My father's jaw worked silently for a moment. Then he nodded, sharp and bitter. Fine. But don't come crying to us when you realize you've chosen money over family. Don't expect us to be there when you finally understand what you've lost. I already know what I've lost, I said softly. I lost the parents I thought I had. Turns out they never existed in the first place. They left without another word, my mother's sobs echoing across the marble floors as my father guided her toward the exit. The crowd parted silently to let them through. When the heavy doors finally closed behind them, the ballroom remained eerily quiet. Then Brielle was there, her arms around me, her body shaking with sobs. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were going to do that. I swear I didn't know. I held her tight, my baby sister, and felt my grandmother's hand on my shoulder. It's not your fault, Brie. None of this is your fault. They ruined my party. No, I said firmly. They made a scene at your party. But they didn't ruin it. Look around. She lifted her head, wiping her eyes. Around us, guests were moving again, conversations resuming. Donovan appeared with fresh champagne. Aunt Vivian began directing servers to refill glasses. Someone turned the music up. The celebration was knitting itself back together, resilient despite the tear that had been ripped through it. Ladies and gentlemen, my grandmother's voice rang out, clear and strong despite her age. I apologize for that unfortunate interruption. Tonight is about Brielle and Donovan, and their beautiful future together. So please, let's toast to them. To love. To loyalty. To choosing wisely who we trust with our hearts. Glasses raised throughout the room. The toast echoed back, to love. To loyalty. To trust. Brielle squeezed my hand. Are you okay? I thought about the question. Was I okay? My parents had just revealed themselves as people I barely recognized. My grandmother had just announced she was leaving me everything, which would surely cause more family drama down the line. I'd just told my parents to leave, possibly ending our relationship forever. But I was standing in a room full of people who just watched my parents try to bully me and had clearly sided with me. I had my grandmother's hand on my shoulder, warm and steady. I had my sister's love, uncomplicated and fierce. I had an estate that represented security, legacy, and my grandmother's faith in me. "Yeah," I said, surprised to find it was true. "Yeah, I think I am." The party continued into the night. I danced with Brielle, laughed with Donovan's family, accepted hugs and whispered support from relatives I barely knew. My grandmother held court in her chair by the window, looking more alive than she had in months, vindicated in her decisions. Around midnight, as guests began filtering out, Judge Carmichael approached me. He was a distinguished man in his 70s, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "Ms. Hartley," he said formally, then smiled. "Lennox, your grandmother asked me to speak with you. I want you to know that the will is ironclad. I've anticipated every possible challenge. Your parents cannot contest it successfully. The estate is yours, legally and completely." "Thank you," I said, though part of me wondered if legal protection was enough against the emotional assault that would surely come. He seemed to read my thoughts. "It's going to be hard for a while. They'll try guilt. They'll try anger. They might try reconciliation as a manipulation tactic. But you did the right thing tonight. You set a boundary. You enforced it. That's something many people never learn to do, especially with family." After he left, I found my grandmother alone for the first time all night. I sat beside her, taking her hand. "I'm sorry I made things worse between you and Mom," I said. "You didn't make anything worse, darling. You simply refused to make it better at your own expense. There's a difference." She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Your mother is my daughter, and I love her. But love doesn't mean enabling self-destruction. It doesn't mean sacrificing you to save her from herself. Do you think she'll ever forgive us?" "I don't know. Perhaps. Perhaps not. But Lennox, listen to me carefully." She turned to face me fully, her blue eyes intense. "You cannot set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. You cannot surrender your security, your future, your peace of mind because someone else made poor choices. That's not love. That's martyrdom. And martyrdom helps no one." I leaned my head on her shoulder, feeling tears slip down my cheeks again. "I feel terrible." "Good. That means you're human. That means you still love them despite everything. But feeling terrible doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. Sometimes the right choice is the one that hurts." We sat in silence for a while, watching the last of the guests depart, watching Brielle and Donovan's steal kisses in the corner, watching the staff begin the cleanup. "Grandmother," I said finally, "thank you. For protecting me. For believing in me. For fighting for me even when it cost you your relationship with your own daughter." "You're my granddaughter," she said simply. "That's what grandmothers do." 3 weeks later, I received a letter from my parents. Not an email. Not a text. A physical letter, delivered by certified mail, requiring my signature. I stared at it for an hour before opening it. Inside were 2 pages of dense text, accusations, justifications, demands. They wanted me to know how much I'd hurt them. How betrayed they felt. How I'd chosen money over family, just like they'd said. They detailed their financial situation in brutal clarity, the debts, the pending foreclosure, the mounting legal bills for my father's malpractice case. They explained how the estate could save them, could give them a fresh start, could preserve the family. They ended with an ultimatum: transfer the property to them within 30 days, or they would cut off all contact. I wouldn't be welcome at family gatherings. They wouldn't attend my future wedding. They wouldn't meet my future children. I would be, effectively, orphaned by choice. My choice. I read the letter 3 times. Then I called my grandmother. "They sent me an ultimatum," I told her. "I received one too," she said calmly. "I imagine Brielle did as well." "What did yours say?" "That I'm a bitter old woman who's turned their daughter against them. That I'm manipulating you. That I should be ashamed of myself." She paused. What are you going to do? I looked around my apartment, my small, cozy, paid-for by my own work apartment. I thought about the estate, sitting peaceful and protected in the countryside, waiting for me to decide what to do with it. I thought about the future I could build, the security I could maintain, the choices I could make. I'm going to let them go, I said quietly. I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to defend myself anymore. I'm just going to let them go. That's very brave, my grandmother said. It doesn't feel brave. It feels sad. Most brave things do. I didn't hear from my parents after that. The 30-day deadline came and went. My phone didn't ring. My email stayed silent. It was like they'd simply ceased to exist. Brielle called constantly, torn between her loyalty to me and her guilt about Mom and Dad. I told her the same thing every time: you don't have to choose. This is between them and me. You're allowed to have relationships with everyone. She tried. She really did. But slowly, she stopped mentioning them. Stopped suggesting family dinners. Stopped asking if I'd reconsidered. Instead, she asked about the estate. What I planned to do with it. Whether I'd thought about renovations or renting it, or maybe someday, living there. 6 months after the engagement party, I drove out to see the property. I hadn't been there since my grandmother had officially signed it over to me 5 years earlier. I'd paid the bills, handled the maintenance through a property manager, but I hadn't actually visited. It had felt too painful, too weighted with expectations and pressure. The long driveway wound through old-growth trees, their leaves beginning to turn with autumn color. The house emerged like something from a dream, a sprawling Victorian with wraparound porches, original stained glass, and gardens that had grown wild but not ugly. I walked through rooms filled with my grandparents' furniture, my grandmother's collections, decades of family history. I stood in the kitchen where my grandmother had taught me to make pie crust. I sat on the porch where my grandfather had told me stories about the war. I wandered through bedrooms that could someday hold my children, if I had them. And I understood, finally, what my grandmother had been protecting. Not just a property. Not just money. But possibility. Choice. The freedom to build a life on my own terms, without debt or desperation or someone else's poor decisions dictating my options. She'd given me wings. My parents had wanted to clip them to keep themselves aloft. I called her from the porch as the sun set over the gardens. I'm here, I told her. At the estate. What do you think? I think it's home, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I think I'm going to move here. Commute to work, or maybe ask about remote options. I'm going to restore the gardens. Fix the porch railing. Learn to make pie crust in that kitchen without burning it. That sounds perfect, my grandmother said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Thank you, I said again. For everything. For fighting for me. For giving me this. You're welcome, darling. But remember, I didn't give it to you. I entrusted it to you. There's a difference. You earned this. You proved you'd protect it, value it, honor it. Never let anyone make you feel guilty for being worthy of trust. I stayed at the estate that night, sleeping in the master bedroom, listening to the house settle around me. I didn't feel alone. I felt surrounded by love, my grandmother's, my grandfather's. The accumulated affection of everyone who'd lived here and cared for it. A year later, Brielle got married. My parents didn't attend. They sent her a card and a check that bounced. I walked her down the aisle in our father's place. I gave a toast about love and loyalty and choosing people who choose you back. I danced with her and Donovan in the garden of the estate, which I'd restored to its former glory. My grandmother presided over everything from her chair, wearing purple and pearls, looking like the queen she'd always been. Do you ever regret it? Brielle asked me late that night, after most guests had left. Losing them. I thought about it honestly. Did I regret the loss of my parents? The relationship that could have been? The family gatherings that would never happen? I regret that they chose money over me, I said finally. I regret that they couldn't love me enough to respect my boundaries. I regret that they'll miss my life, my wedding someday, my children if I have them. But do I regret standing up for myself? Protecting what grandmother entrusted to me? No. I don't regret that at all. Good, Brielle said fiercely. Because you were right. About all of it. My grandmother died peacefully 2 years later, in her sleep, in the bedroom she'd shared with my grandfather for 40 years. I held her hand as she slipped away, and her last words to me were, "You did good, darling. I'm so proud." The will reading was perfunctory. Everything went to me, exactly as she'd promised. The estate. The investments. The Vermont property. The Manhattan apartment. All of it managed through a trust that couldn't be contested, couldn't be challenged, couldn't be taken. My parents didn't attend the funeral. They sent a lawyer with a letter demanding their rightful share of the inheritance. Judge Carmichael sent back a single sentence: "The will is valid and final. This matter is closed." I never heard from them again. Sometimes, late at night in the house that's now truly mine, I wonder what they're doing. Whether they declared bankruptcy. Whether they lost their home. Whether they ever think about me with anything other than resentment and blame. But mostly, I'm grateful. Grateful for a grandmother who saw clearly and loved fiercely. Grateful for a sister who chose our relationship over their manipulation. Grateful for the lesson learned, that family isn't who shares your blood. It's who fights for your best interests, even when it's hard. Even when it costs them. I sit on the porch my grandfather built, in the house my grandmother protected, on the land that's mine by choice and trust and love. I make pie crust in the kitchen without burning it. I tend gardens that bloom in defiance of neglect. I build a life that's mine. And sometimes, revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's simply living well, choosing wisely, and protecting what matters. Sometimes revenge is watching someone's greed silence itself while you build a beautiful life from the ashes of their demands. That's the best revenge of all.